there is no deed which goes unpaid in a good way as well. We have to know that God has an accounting for us. Everything that we do, Shem sees. Some is rewarded in this world, some in the next, some to our children, some to our grandchildren. Those are things which are greater than us. They're beyond us to know how and when and who we get rewarded by and how. This week's Torah portion is the second Torah portion in our fourth book, the book of Bamidbar, and it is the Parashat of Nasso. If we pay attention to the Parashat of Nasso, the Torah portion of Nasso, it is actually our Torah's longest portion. With no less than 176 verses, it weighs in as our Torah's longest Torah portion. So there's obviously a lot to talk about, and we're not going to be here all night talking about it. We're going to select two very specific parts of this week's Torah portion that the Zera Shimshon focuses in on. The first being a verse that we'll quote. It is in the 5th chapter of Bamidbar, the 9th and 10th verse. And I'll quote it as follows. It says, V'chol teruma lechol kodshe b'nei Yisrael, and every portion from any of the holies that the children of Israel bring to the temple, asher yakrivu lakohen lo yihye, that they bring to the Kohen, are for him. The next verse, Ve'ish et kodashav lo yihyu, ish asher yiten lakohen lo yihye, and a man's holies, his sacrifices that he brings shall be his, and what a man gives to the Kohen shall be his. So just to give an introduction to what we're talking about, and then we'll delve into the question of the Zera Shimshon, is that in the time of the temple, there were gifts and sacrifices and things that were given specially to the Kohanim. Remember, the Kohanim did not have a profession. There were 24 families of the Kohanim, and each family had their shift to work in the temple 2 weeks of the year. And besides for that, what they would be doing is they would be sitting in the yeshivot, in the Bet Midrash, in the Kollel, whether it be in Jerusalem or in Israel, and they would dedicate their lives to learning Torah, and specifically learning and perfecting the way to carry out their service in the temple on behalf of the Jewish people. This is what they would do. They had no other means per se of livelihood. Their livelihood, for the most portion, came from the gifts that they would receive during their service in the temple. So there were gifts given. There was obviously parts of the animal and meat and hides that were brought up as the korbanot, fruits and produce and vegetables that were brought from all over the world. This is the way the Kohanim sustained themselves, them and their families. That was their livelihood. So that's exactly what the Torah is telling us in this time, in this portion, in this exact 2 verses. However, the Zera Shimshon focuses and says that there's something that is repeating itself over and over. He says at the end of the first pasuk, it says, La Kohen lo yihye. For the Kohen, it is his. And then in the second pasuk, in verse 10, it says, Ish et kodashav lo yihye. It's for you, lo you, it's for him. And then, Ish asher yiten lo, La Kohen lo yihye. Again, over and over, it's going to be for him. It's going to be for him. It's going to be for him. It seems like, if you look into these verses, that the Torah is repeating itself over and over, saying the same thing. We know that when you bring a gift to the Kohen, we know it belongs to the Kohen. So why within 2 verses are we repeating it 3 extra times, which seem like it needs no place for it to be there? This is the Zera Shimshon's question. He starts off by answering it with a halacha from Maimonides. The Rambam, in Hilchot Terumot, the word teruma means to give. Traditionally, if we learn Mishnayot, teruma and terumot were tithes, portions separated and taken away from produce that, As farmers, which was the main method of business, everyone had farms and everyone was a farmer, those tithes that were taken off and given to the Kohen were called terumot. So the Rambam in Hilchot Terumot, the Rambam in the laws of the gifts that are needed to be given and tithe, those portions for the Kohen, he says, from the Torah, the only obligation, the only produce of obligation that is needed to be tithed is produce in Eretz Yisrael. Produce from Eretz Yisrael. Now, he says later on the prophets came along and they said, the land of Shinar, which is also adjacent to the land of Israel, also needs to be tithed. The produce from that land also. Some time passed, and the way the Zera Shimshon refers to them are the Chachamim Rishonim, the first Chachamim, the first sages. Obviously this is post the prophets. They came and added some more locations. They said, Mitzrayim, Egypt, and Ammon and Moab. All these three lands, which are also adjacent to the land of Israel, also those places, any produce that is there, needs to be tithed. He says Shinar, the prophets instituted it because the majority of the Jewish people would be traveling to Shinar. Now if they were traveling for business, pleasure, Club Med, whatever the reason is.
Where was Shinar?
Shinar is adjacent. It's in the northeast section, which is adjacent to Israel. And then you have Ammon and Moab, and then you have Mitzrayim, you have Egypt. So first Shinar, because the majority of the Jewish people were going there. Later on, the Chachamim Rishonim, the first sages, they came along and said, since it's adjacent and it's very common to be there, all those places need to have their produce also separated, a portion given to the Kohen. This is how he starts off by answering the Zera Shimshon. Then he brings a piece of the Talmud. The Talmud in Masechet Berachot says as follows, that anyone who gives to the Kohen will have. If you give to the Kohen, you'll have. Now, how do we understand that? It's like the rule of giving charity. The more you give, the more you get. God gives us and He lends us. We've learned this already previously from the Zera Shimshon. He lends us wealth, produce, talents, wisdom. He lends us all these great traits, and He sees, what are my children going to do with this? What is my child going to do with this wealth, with this fortune, with this wisdom, with this great talent that I've given him or her? And if it's utilized properly, God says, let's give more. So great fortune was given to an individual. They're helping the poor. They're helping support Torah, Jewish schools, rebuilding the land of Israel, anything and everything that is happening and that is good. That's all fine. God says, you do good, we'll do more. We'll give you more. That's what the Gemara says. Give to the Kohen, you'll have. What are you going to have? You're going to have a lot more blessing. So look what the Zera Shimshon says. The reason for the repetition of the Torah over and over again. He says, you might think that the only time you have a blessing, that the more you give, the more you get, is when you give produce from Eretz Yisrael, when you tithe Israeli produce, living in Israel. You might think that's the only time you have the blessing of the more you give, the more you get. Comes the Torah and hints to saying no. Lo yeh, lo yu, lo yeh. It's going to be for him. It's going to be for him. It's going to be for him. What's going to be for him? The blessing for the one who gives is going to be given back to the giver. But not only in the first section of Eretz Yisrael, even in the decree the prophets added in Shinar, and even in the decree that the Chachamim Rishonim also added in Mitzrayim, Ammon, and Moab lands. Meaning even the rabbinical decrees of giving a portion to the Kohen, even in those, the Torah is hinting that a person gives, he will also be blessed with a tremendous amount of wealth and be given back. This is what the Zera Shimshon says. I look at this piece and I say, on one hand, it's completely irrelevant to our lives nowadays. Yet on the other hand, I see a very strong message the Zera Shimshon is sharing with us. Sometimes we look at our Torah and we question. And we look at our lives and we question, we say, the things that we do we do them because it says it in the Torah? Or do we do them because, and I hate to use this expression, but say that they are man-made, that they've been adapted by human beings? The truth is, if we look at a lot of what we do, the answer is a lot, almost everything was in some aspect or another adapted by human beings. Not because human beings, or namely to say the Chachamim, invented it on their own. It's because when God gave Moses the Torah, he gave him a written portion and he gave an oral portion. When the oral portion was given to Moses, it was given to teach over and not to be recorded. It was given oral to be stayed oral. That's the first part of what the Torah was given to as humanity and to the Jewish people, to Bnei Israel. But then came the Chachamim and from themselves evaluated the situations and said, there are certain cases where we need to be more stringent in order to avoid sin, in order to avoid a mistake. We'll give an example. The Torah never speaks about waiting any time between eating meat and milk. It just says not to eat it together. And it's really it says, don't cook a kid in his mother's milk. It says it 3 times in almost the exact terminology. The Talmud learns, well, why would the same commandment be taught over 3 times? Okay, one is to teach you can't cook meat and milk. Second is to teach you can't eat meat and milk. The third is to teach you can't even benefit from meat and milk. That was all from the Torah, that's all God. But not eating meat directly after milk is an institution from our sages. And they said that once you've eaten meat, you wait 6 hours till you have milk. If you're going from milk to meat, it's fine. Wash out your mouth, eat or drink something, wash your hands. You don't need to wait. Unless it's hard cheese or Parmesan, then you would need to, according to many, wait at least an hour. But to go from meat to milk, according to the Torah, you could do it right away. Chachamim came and said 6 hours. So why? There's different interpretations. One opinion is because maybe the meat, the density of the meat and the strands will get caught in your teeth and they will stay there. Another interpretation is that it's so the lard, so to say, or the oil of the meat stays in one's mouth and throat, and then when you have dairy directly after, you're going to be having meat and milk at the same time. But that is a institution from our sages that we're not allowed to take lightly, that no one's allowed to change. That is how they instituted it. So what I see from the Zera Shimshon is that not only does it work in that direction, that when Chachamim said to do something, we better follow them or else. But even in the opposite, when Chachamim said to do something and the Torah promises blessing, even though the Torah did not promise a specific blessing for that fulfillment of what you're doing, but more of what the Chachamim added on, the blessing still stays there. The power of the institution of our Chachamim, whether it be for the positive or for the restrictive, is there to also allow God's blessing to take place. So that's what I see from the Zera Shimshon. Not only do we have that promise and that blessing if you fulfill the tithing in Eretz Yisrael, which is the Torah obligation. But even where the prophets and even where the Chachamim added on to keep the laws of separating a portion for the Kohen, the same blessing applies there. You know why? Because the sages, our Chachamim, instituted to fulfill that mitzvah right there and then, just as one is supposed to fulfill it in Eretz Yisrael. It's a great lesson for us. It's a great lesson for us to open the Talmud, open the Halakha, open the Rambam, open and see what our sages say to do. Where do they promise blessing? Where do they say stay away from because you, unfortunately, an individual will fall and trip and sin over there. I think this theme works perfectly with the Zera Shimshon, who promised that anyone who learns his Torah will have a blessing. It's a Chacham making a decree. It's not someone, just a random person making a decree. If you do this and you do that. No, we're talking Torah scholars. We're talking individuals who dedicated their lives to God, to the Torah, and to Am Yisrael. They're no simple people. And when they make promises, and when they tell us how to do and how not to do, and restrictions, and they warrant blessings, we need to understand, not to take them too lightly, to understand how important they are, and to understand that God's blessing does take place even when the Chachamim decreed it.